Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Get More Clients. I'm your host, Lynn Whitbeck. Business owners and entrepreneurs hire me to ignite winning sales because most are chasing down leads, lack client retention, conversion, and profits. The mission of this show is to educate, inspire, and motivate women and men around the world to build a robust sales strategy to get more clients, because many can't get more clients and haven't a clue why. You will learn to transform thinking to the client's perspective, eliminate the lengthy, chaotic sales cycle to ignite your sales and unleash lasting profits. You'll also have the opportunity to connect with me further to see how I can support you beyond today. Now, last week, I shared how to rapidly improve sustainable sales profits with 5 proven strategies. And today I am joined by an amazing woman, the mental MacGyver. Her name is Dr. Robyn Odegaard, and I will be sharing with Robyn how to conquer your inner obstacles and fears for true success. Now, Dr. Robyn is a former competitive beach volleyball player with a doctorate in business psychology, focusing on peak performance. Her combination of real-world experience, formal education, and 15 years experience working with high-profile clientele makes Dr. Robyn unique in the coaching world. And she is truly and affectionately known as the mental MacGyver because Dr. Robyn's expertise is in real-life complexities. Dr. Robyn, I should say, I am so glad to have you here. Please, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks for that great introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, I've gotten the opportunity to know Dr. Robyn for a long time, and this is such an important topic, and this is her area of expertise that she's going to be able to share. Head trash, that voice in your head, psychological barriers, chaos. No matter what you call it, everyone deals with it, and these mental roadblocks hold us back from achieving our true potential, and that includes in our sales and sales careers. By the end of today's show, you will know how to understand the 2 distinct types of fear, trauma-based fear and intuition-based fear, how to differentiate between these fears, breaking through the former while heeding the wisdom of the latter, and how to navigate your fears with clarity and purpose. By examining the origins of our negative self-talk, we can make conscious and purposeful choices. For tomorrow to be different, we have to make a change today. And your future self is going to thank you. So, Dr. Robyn, let's dive right into this and really get to the crux of this first piece. And how do you gain an understanding of the 2 distinct types of fear, that trauma-based fear and intuition-based fear?
Right. So the first thing you have to do is recognize there are 2 different kinds. And I've made the mistake of mixing them up, much to my detriment. So here's what happens. Intuition-based fear is your gut saying, that is a bad idea. Do not do that. It's trying to protect you. It's that internal wisdom. And many of us have gotten good, unfortunately, at ignoring that voice, because so many people say, you have to walk through fear. Success is on the other side of fear. And they don't differentiate between these 2 fears. And so we walk through that intuition-based, hey, that's not a good idea, when we should listen to it. Hey, don't do that. Cost me $20,000. I did that once, walk through some intuition-based fear. So trauma-based fear is more of the voice in your head, a parent saying, hey, don't do that. That's scary. Hey, you'll get hurt. That's not a smart idea. Don't do that. Play small. That's that trauma-based fear that comes from people telling us, don't play big, don't do the scary things. That's the kind of fear you have to be able to walk through to be able to get to that success.
Yeah, so for some practical examples, I'm going to throw myself up here. So for the trauma-based fear, one of the things that I did when I first started Petite to Queen in my business is I was very nervous in front of the camera. And I would say, I'm not an actress. I can't do this. And I had to reframe that in my mind. First of all, like, well, what was going on? And there were some experiences of doing some plays, types of things from school, right? And those humility squares that we all have, but that had created this sense that I couldn't get in front of a camera and to do video shows, podcasts, things like that. And so for that, I had to switch it in my brain and start to think about, well, no, this is a skill. I reframed it and I can learn this skill. I've learned lots of things in the past, and sort of also like, why was I so afraid of being in front of the camera? Because I was afraid of looking like a fool or of, just starting to go on and on like I am right now, whatever it happens to be. So, and of course I did walk through that. I got through it by reframing it, working on it, and by doing, I got better and better. So, and I'm never going to be an actress. That's not the training that I have, or nor do I desire, but I can be my authentic self. So is that a good example for the trauma-based fear?
That's a phenomenal example. It's a great example of your brain telling you, oh my goodness, don't do that. That's super scary. And you being able to say to that part of your brain, hey, I know we're scared, but I think we can do this. Let's work through it. And the downside for you, there wasn't a lot of risk to give it a try. And you were able to tell yourself that, like, okay, worst case scenario, somebody makes fun of me because I'm not an actress. All right, who cares? That's a really good example. Thanks for sharing that one, Lynn.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there's ones that are trauma-based that are much, much deeper. So mine's a pretty light and frothy one. Now, the second one of that intuition-based fear, and once again, I'm going to give something that's light and frothy. So, you're carrying in groceries and dry cleaning and who knows what all into the house. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but you're trying to do it all, trying to get one load.
Yep.
And you're literally, and you think to yourself, okay, this is a bad idea. I'm going to drop something. I'm going to trip on the dry cleaning bag. And, you end up, actually like misstepping or something. And instead you say, okay, I can take 2 trips, just take half of it and make it easier. And of course, that's one of those things that's, I think, is an intuition-based fear. Now, that is something where, and once again, that's light and frothy. It's not life. Well, I mean, if you have a serious fall, it could be pretty life-threatening, but in general, but is that, once again, is that, a light and frothy example of that intuition-based?
It is. And anytime that something happens and you're like, I know better, that's when you know, oh, my intuition tried to tell me. I can give an example of a time I didn't listen to it recently. We were going to go hiking. It was really cold. I had gotten the dog's jacket out to set on, and I set it on the island so we wouldn't forget it. And I saw my husband pouring his coffee on the island. And I thought, I should move the jacket. And then I thought, that's dumb. Why do I need to move the jacket? It can sit there while he pours coffee. He knocked over 20 ounces of coffee all over the jacket. And so we ended up having to run to the pet store and we found a little jacket on sale and it worked out. But like, I knew, my brain said to me, Robyn, move the dog's jacket. Did I listen? No.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And you had also given that, pretty much a higher level example of when your gut's telling you don't do something in a business decision, in a work, in a relationship decision. So let's sort of drive into, how do you differentiate between these fears so that people can start to recognize which is which? And then while you break through those trauma-based fears, while listening to your gut or heeding the wisdom of the intuition-based fears.
Right. So the first thing you have to do is realize that the part of your brain that has fear doesn't have access to language. It's going to give you a lot of feeling, a lot of concern, maybe anxiety. It's not going to give you a lot of language. And the part of your brain that can do something about it and determine, is this fear, is this intuition, what's going on, is your prefrontal cortex. It only uses language. It can't deal with fear. It doesn't know what that means. So when you start getting that anxiety, something starting to stress you, your logical brain is basically going to say, fight, flight, freeze. Just tell me what to do. And the best way I've found for people to kind of work through this is kind of ask the part of that brain that's scared, concerned, hey, what's going on? What are you trying to protect me from? What is this fear? Much like you did, like you started looking into it. Okay, why am I afraid of getting in front of the camera? Like you kind of investigated it. It works best if you can do it out loud. For some people, journaling works, but for most people, the ability to talk through something, and I'm sure you've done it, where you're kind of talking as you're thinking, and it's kind of coming out a little bit, hold on, what do I think about this? That's a really good way to allow that emotional side of your brain to kind of slowly unwrap what's happening. And it works best if you have someone who can ask you really good questions and kind of engage with it. The one caveat I will give you is if you have someone who is really staunchly in one camp or the other, always listen to your fear. Never listen to your fear. That's not a good person to do this with. You don't want to unpack with someone who's staunchly one or the other. You can also do it by sitting in front of a Zoom and just talking to yourself on Zoom, or talking to yourself in the mirror. But it works best if you have another person to unpack it with.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so with the fear-based trauma, I mean, now would you describe some of that as the head trash that will, and the blockers that will hold people back, or is that qualify for either of those fears?
It can be either of them can. Well, so let me back up a minute. Fear-based in trauma, absolutely head trash.
Okay.
Fear-based in intuition, can't really call it trash. It's good for you if you can learn to listen to it. So I would say one definitely head trash. The other one, pay attention.
And then what's that difference between like head trash and psychological barriers?
So head trash is part of the psychological barriers. So psychological barriers for me, and the way that I define them, are things like imposter syndrome, right? That's head trash. Self-sabotage, which may be self-medicating with alcohol. I see that a lot in really successful people. Unfortunately, just wrote an article about that on LinkedIn. Depriving yourself of sleep, or not eating well, or not exercising, not taking care of your health. That's self-sabotage. That's part of it. That's not head trash, but it's a psychological barrier, right? Damaging your personal relationships, not keeping up with the people who love you, staying in relationships with people who don't treat you well. Those are things are part of the head trash that can happen. We can have the upper limiting problem, which is there's an unconscious belief that I'm only allowed to be this much successful. And if I get above that, things start falling apart, and I self-sabotage on those kind of things. That's a psychological barrier. There can be cultural issues. There can be negative self-talk. That's a big one. I ask people sometimes, A, do you listen to the voice in your head? And B, do you agree with it? Do you believe what it's telling you? That's a question I sometimes have, because people often don't listen to the voice in their head because it is just so there and so negative, and it's not words, it's feelings. So it's easy to just let it take over. And then for a lot of executives and founders, I see the overworked, overwhelmed, undervalued, underutilized, and underestimated. And those are all psychological barriers that need to be overcome. So a long list there I just gave you.
Yeah, no, that was really great. So the other thing I guess I would ask is about the negative self-talk, because I mean, I think we need to normalize it. We're animals. We have negative self-talk for a reason. Some of it is that intuition, self-preservation, right? Some of it is very instinctual. And some of it is from those traumas that we had. But when we think about negative self-talk, can you give us some examples or stats about how prevalent it is every day in every individual?
Everyone, most of the time, with the exception of people. So if you are psychologically healthy, you likely have a voice in your head giving you negative self-talk. People who are really, really narcissistic often don't, or they've managed to silence it to the point that they're just, I'm great. But if you're psychologically healthy, you have a voice in your head. I gave mine a name, so I can just recognize her voice and be like, oh, look, there's Harriet again. And sometimes I ask her, hey, what's going on? What are we stressed about? And sometimes I'm just like, be quiet just for a minute and let me think.
Yeah, I've named mine Negative Nelly. And then for guys, I call it Negative Ned, but it's the same thing. And you catch yourself like, wow, I really didn't do much today. And I go, wait, stop, Negative Nelly. I did this, and this. And it's immediately like, I did a lot. And I catch myself with these negative thoughts. And they happen all the time. And I think it's important to recognize it and to call it out, and at least, in that little mental space, say, wait a minute here.
Yep.
I'm not going down this road with you.
Yes, exactly. And it happens when positive things happen. I'll give you a great example for me that just happened this morning. I woke up this morning and someone had written me an absolutely beautiful LinkedIn recommendation. And I read it, and the voice in my head immediately went, did they really mean that about you? You're really not that impressive. And I had to back up and be like, hold on. You don't get to decide what other people get to think about you.
Well, congratulations, and that's a great example. So now let's talk about that other part of that head trash or psychological barriers that could be that that intuition based, where it's really it is holding us back. And how can, but maybe it's holding us back for a good reason. So that gut. So how can we really work on heeding the wisdom of that intuition based fear?
Exactly. And that's about looking for the wisdom. Why is this a concern? So I'll go back to the example I said at the very top where I lost $20,000. And I'll show you the red flags that I ignored because I thought it was trauma-based fear and it was actually intuition-based fear. Because an example is the best way.
Yeah.
So set up the story. I was looking to hire someone to help me market some events that I was going to be doing. And I got referred to someone and I went and talked to him, and he was very gregarious and outgoing and felt a little bit slimy to me, like salesy slimy.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe marketers are just like that, whatever. And I asked him for references, and he gave me his friends as references. He didn't give me clients as references. Did that trigger me? No. Was I paying attention? Not at all. But, and of course his friends were like, oh man, he's great. But this is the biggest one I ignored. I asked him, when people stop working with you, what's the usual cause? A good answer is, we succeeded at what we were doing, we finished the project. Those are good answers. What he said to me was, they run out of money. Right? So the trigger for me should have been, because my intuition was like, this is not a good thing. The trigger for me should have been, if you're working with a marketer, they should make more in returns than you're spending with them. That's the point of working with a marketer. So if people are stopping working with him because they run out of money, he's not doing his job. I didn't pay attention. I didn't notice.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think a classic for me is I always say, well, people graduate. I mean, when I work with them for sales strategy, they graduate. They've implemented this and it's going well. They're getting the results that they wanted. And, they come back when they have a new challenge that arises and they rehire me to help them with that. But
exactly,
essentially they graduate as far, and that's what I want. I don't expect people to be clients for a really long time. And I mean, there's a few unusual cases where they keep me on retainer for different reasons, but right. But those are really good examples. And I actually have one for myself. Now, this is back in my corporate career, and I was looking to change jobs. And part of it was, we'd gone through a corporate hostile takeover. It was a pretty negative situation there. The workspace was a little toxic on that level. Now, my regular work that I was doing with my clients, things like that, no problem there. But there were things that I was constantly having to battle and navigate. And so I was interviewing with some companies to move my business. Same thing. I got these first meeting. I didn't like them. And I didn't know exactly why. And I didn't allow myself to dive into why. And then I went to a second meeting, and it was the same thing. This gut feeling of just no. I ignored it. And so each step I kept ignoring that gut telling me, no, 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 because there was, as I subsequently realized, there was a really core philosophical approach to sales and value set that was different. And just the way they did business. And I went to work for them. And 1 week later, I found myself sobbing in my shower, going, what the hell did you do? Because you ignored all the intuition. And of course, all that negative self-talk and trash, instead it was, all right, what am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about this situation?
Right.
I've moved all my clients. I'm going to have to make the best of this, and I've got to make the best of it for a certain amount of time before I can justify moving them again.
Mm.
And I also went, what can I learn or gain from this experience? Is there value in learning how to do things a different way, or just seeing that side of it? Right.
Mhm.
So I tried to look for the silver lining.
Yep.
And I was able to stick it out for 2 years. But essentially I knew that I was going to be moving, and then that second year I was very careful about where I moved to. I actually moved back to the company I'd been at before. So the
Yep.
thing is that was that same thing. My gut, and to this day, I really haven't analyzed what it was that disturbed me so much, but it was literally screaming, I don't like these. I don't like them.
Yep.
You know?
And that's the challenge, is if you have an intuition-based fear, an intuition-based, this is not a good idea, sometimes you can't find the logic to back it up. The red flags may not be obvious on the front end. You just have to say, you know what, and there are a lot of CEOs who are really successful that when you start delving into how do you make decisions, I had a gut feeling. I have one friend who's like, I think sometimes I'm psychic. I'm like, you know what? Your gut's very strong. Go with it. And he's been really successful.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's great. These are great examples. So let's move on to the next part, which I really want to give our audience this framework on how one begins to navigate their fears with clarity and purpose.
Boy, this is the tough part, right? This is where the rubber meets the road. The first thing you have to do is really start listening to that internal voice, listening to that part of your brain that's like, hey, this is a good idea. Hey, this is a bad idea. And I got to tell you, Lynn, the older you get, the better you're going to get at intuition. When you're young, you're going to learn by making mistakes. That's just the way that it works. It's hard to tell. If you can talk to someone and, kind of talk through it, like I said before, that's going to help you. But the first thing you have to do is really start noticing, what is that voice in your head saying? What is that gut feeling? What's going on with you? And so many of us are just plowing through life at 1,000,000 miles an hour. We're not paying attention. So what does it look like for you to take a moment? And I'm not saying you have to sit in a lotus position and say Om and meditate. I'm not saying that. But I am saying, if you're driving somewhere, maybe turn the radio off and give your subconscious a chance to talk to you. If you always have input coming in, you never have a chance for that subconscious voice in your brain to go, you know what? I don't know if I'm okay with what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to offer up my example. So when I have this type of thing, one of the things I do is I literally get up out of my chair, leave my desk, and I take a walk. Now, this can just be a walk on my street. It can be, I can drive. I've got a park that's a 5-minute drive. They have a bunch of different trails, so I can do a trail walk. But even if I'm just like right outside, just walking, I can still, what I do is I just start to focus on all of my senses. What do I smell? What do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel? Because I can touch a leaf. I might be able to feel the wind on my face. One of the things that I find is that helps ground me, and I just let my mind wander. And so I do this for a purpose, is so that I can reset my brain. And then I think I put that topic in my, what is going on? And I just let my brain sort of, chew on it. And as things bubble up, I go, oh, interesting. What does that mean? And so through that process, and sometimes it's literally 5 minutes because I just do a really quick walk. Longer times it might be 20 or 30 minutes. But to me, why this is so important is I look at this as I'm giving myself the gift of introspection, and that I can spend time to try to sort of sort out, like, what are the feelings? And I'll ask, what am I feeling about this? What's my motivation or what's my fear on this? Because that's another thing. Sometimes there's a fear that I fear failure, and I need to look that in the face. And I need to say, well, what's the worst thing that can happen if I fail at this? So like when I learned how to get in front of the camera, and I would challenge everyone, if you go to my website, all the way at the bottom of our media is that very first interview I did, which was god awful.
They always are. The first one's always terrible. If you don't look back on the first one and think it's terrible, you're not growing.
Yeah. So, but I think that for the audience, what I would recommend is you need to give yourself the gift of introspection in whichever way works for you. So that you can sit with yourself, whether you is in the lotus position, in your shower with, a paper and pencil that actually work in the, the shower, so you might be able to
I
jot down your
sometimes
thought.
yell at my phone, "Hey Siri, make a note," from the shower.
Yes. Yeah. Another great, or you have a dream and you wake up and you've got a pad of paper. Yes. Whatever it happens to be. Well, Dr. Robyn, thank you so much for sharing how to conquer your inner obstacles and fears for true success. As you've revealed, the path is not always easy, but it's undeniably, I should say, worth the adventure. Now, for everyone who's tuned in, all of Dr. Robyn's contact information is going to be below in our show notes. And I highly encourage you to connect with Dr. Robyn, the mental MacGyver. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. My purpose is for you to get more clients. And bottom line, don't make this harder than it has to be. Sales should be a win-win. The fastest way to success is to assure people know that they matter. And the best way to make this happen is to build a consistent sales strategy to acquire, convert, and capitalize on every lead, and sort out your own head trash so that you can find growing your business is easy and lucrative. So today, Dr. Robyn and I explored how to conquer your inner obstacles and fears for true success. Now, the key is for you to implement these steps, the things that Dr. Robyn shared, to stop wasting your time, energy, and resources. Get connected with your trauma-based and your intuition-based fears. And you have the opportunity to jump in and get the support you need for true success, what's working, not working, what you would love to have working. So you can connect with Dr. Robyn and to see how she can support you, and you can connect with me to see how I might further support you in effectively generating more leads, converting more sales, and fulfilling on your promise as a brand and organization. I encourage you to say yes to you and get on a call with Dr. Robyn or with me, because we are both truly gifted at this, and you deserve a shortcut to your success with the right support. So my link is below. And I want to also encourage you to visit our website at petite2queen.com. Never miss an episode of Get More Clients. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter for sales advice and tips. And of course, if you love the show, I would very much appreciate your giving us a 5-star review and subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. And next week, I'm going to have Dr. Robyn back. So we're going to be doing part 2, and we're going to be discussing why assessing your unique brilliance boosts your power. So be there. That's 8 a.m. Pacific on Wednesdays. And Dr. Robyn and I will both see you next week on Get More Clients. And Dr. Robyn, final sign off.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. Thank you for bringing your stories. They were really, really good. And I hope that everyone is able to recognize these 2 different types of fear in their own lives and listen to the intuition and walk through their trauma-based fear. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful host.
Thank you. See everybody next week on Get More Clients.